It is clear that the one who controls aerospace controls this planet. Firstly, I must tell you that India is blessed to be the only country in the world to have an ocean named after it. Yes, Prime Minister recently commissioned India's first indigenous aircraft carrier, ISC-1, they call it, and the Indian Navy calls it INS Vikram. It took us over 2 decades to build. It cost us a lot of money.
Namaskar and Jai Hind. In Samvad today, we have with us Air Marshal Anil Chopra, Director General, Center for Airpower Studies, and a renowned air warrior. And we are discussing the threat of the Chinese Air Force across the Himalayas and how prepared is the Indian Air Force to fight on 2 fronts if the push comes to shove. Welcome to Samvad, sir.
Thank you. Thank you to Kashi Manthan and to Mayank for inviting me. And it's always a pleasure to come on such an important portal. Yes.
Thank you, sir. So to start off with, China has been investing a very large amounts on air and space power. This includes the aircraft carriers they have. Obviously, they have long-range ambitions. So how do you assess the aircraft industry in China and the Chinese Air Force, the PLLAF?
Yeah, Mayank, first I must tell you that the primacy of air power had been established since World War II. It is clear that the one who controls aerospace controls this planet. And if you lose the war in the air, you lose the war on the surface, and you lose it very, very quickly. So this was realized by both the Soviet Union and USA, and they invested heavily in these 2 domains in the early years. In 1950s, they started that. In 1980s, when the Chinese economy started growing rapidly, it also began investing heavily in air and space. So they today have an emerging world-class aviation industry with state-of-the-art projects. Initially, they had mostly reverse-engineered Russian aircraft, and they had also stolen some designs through cyber attacks from the Americans. But now they are becoming independent. In the aircraft industry, they've employed nearly 500,000 personnel. When you compare this with 26,000 of Hindustan Aeronautics in our case, 2 of their companies are in the top global 10 defense manufacturers and 4 in the 25 top global defense manufacturers. They're consciously integrating both air and space. They have 2 stealth aircraft programs, the J-20 and the J-31. J-20 is already flying in reasonable numbers. They're saying around 50 of them. They have built their own large transport aircraft, the Y-20, and they're converting it into air refuelers, into evacs, and to many other roles this aircraft will be converted. They already have nearly 120 H-6 bombers, which can carry 6 cruise missiles. They also have a nuclear variant of that bomber. They have an electronic warfare variant of that bomber. So they are also building a H-20 stealth bomber, which they will induct in around 2025. They are making their own AWACS. They are making a variety of helicopters, including very large ones. They have large UAVs, which they are also exporting to others. They have a program of air-launched cruise missiles and, of course, surface-to-surface missiles. They have an airliner program where an 80-seat airliner is already flying in the airlines, nearly 250 of them. And another larger airliner of 168 seats, which will compete with the Boeing 737 and A320 class of aircraft later on, will be ready anytime. It's already, in fact, final stages of testing. They have a target of made in China technologies by 2025. That's what Xi Jinping has said. All technologies, they'll be independent. They are already an exporter. Arms exporter. Pakistan, of course, gets nearly 60% of their total exports. And as far as the PLA Air Force is concerned, after being under the army mindset for a very long time, they have started coming out of this. They would prefer to be called the Chinese Air Force instead of being called the PLA Air Force. It is the third largest air force in the world with 400,000 personnel. You can compare that with around 170,000 of the Indian Air Force. They have close to 3,000 plus aircraft. 1,700 of which are fighters. And out of these 1,700, nearly 800 to 1,000 are fourth generation plus aircraft. Of course, they're mostly their aircraft of the origin Russians, the Su-27, J-11, J-10, J-15, J-16, all these are, and of course, they also have the Su-35. Larger number of, finally, their backbone is going to be the J-20 and Y-20, which will be the backbone of their Air Force. And they have assigned all the PLA aircraft assigned to theater commands. Theater commands have got brigades. Each brigade has got about 25 to 30 aircraft. And they also have helicopter brigades which are given. And we all know that just opposite us in Himalayas is the Western Theater Command, which is their largest theater. That theater is, in fact, in size bigger than India. The Chinese also have the airborne divisions, three of them, nearly, I would say, 3 times the size of the airborne capability of Indians. They have nearly 150 airfields, and their thrust is on net-centric warfare, and they have own global satellite navigation system. China is having more launches. This year, they're going to have 60 space launches, which is more than the whole of Europe and America put together. We have had only 3 launches this year in India. They are getting into quantum technology, they're getting into cyber, they're getting into artificial intelligence, and the PLA Navy already has 2 aircraft, 3rd and 4th aircraft are under construction, and finally they're going to have close to 6 aircraft carriers. So significant amount of air power is with China today, and it's only growing. Yes.
Obviously, by the information you give us, the Air Force is growing, and you spoke of their aircraft industry exporting aircraft, sir. Hearing a lot about different countries not basically interested in buying Chinese aircrafts, besides the Pakistani Air Force for obvious reasons. Do you actually assess there is some problem with the Chinese technology, or is it just a myth being created by the Western media?
No, Mayank, undoubtedly the Chinese are still way behind the West in many technologies, though they are, mind you, they are catching up. As far as the PLAF size is concerned, I would say that it's around 2.5 times India, but then so is their total land area 2.5 times India. Their first priority is, of course, unifying Taiwan and retention of South China Sea. So the threat to them is primarily from USA and allies who are much better off than them in technology. For its size, PLA Air Force has got too few AWACS and flight refueling aircraft. PLAF has very low combat exposure. The last major war they fought was in Korea. That was in 1950s. After that, they have had small skirmishes. Of course, they had a major war with India in 1962, but in that, the Air Force was hardly used by either side. So they have not, the only exercises in the international world that they are doing is with Pakistan. They don't do exercises with anybody else. And among the technologies, they still do not have their own aero engine. They have made an aero engine, but it's not of the quality and class that they themselves wanted. They are quite behind the West in electronics, in avionics, in radars, in stealth, electronic warfare, in precision munitions, in directed energy weapons, in airborne equipment, composites, airborne certification, global defense, supply chains, management, many areas. They are well behind the West. Yes, there are on other counts catching up. India must be conscious and concerned, but not too bothered. So let us not overrate them too much.
What is the status of the Indian Air Force? Because the Chinese, talking of the Chinese Air Force and the Chinese threat, but we also need to discuss the status of the Indian Air Force. I mean, hearing a lot about a falling number of squadrons and stuff. So what is the preparedness of the Indian Air Force?
Yes, Mayank, we are, our fighter strength is at nearly all-time low. We have currently around 1,700 aircraft in the Indian Air Force, out of which nearly 650 are fighters. And out of these 650, around 500 are fourth generation plus. And as I told you, the Chinese have close to 1,000 fourth generation plus aircraft. And of course, their fighters are more than double than ours. So there is, but we have got the Rafale and Meteor combination, which is very potent, and will be well placed even against the J-20. But clearly, the fighter squadron strength, which is an all-time low of 30, must go up to the authorized 42 at the earliest. Though all kinds of permutation and combinations have been worked out, we all have written about it. The ground reality is that even if we do the fastest means in terms of procuring those 114 new fighters, or we were to accelerate the production of the LCA and development of LCA Mark II and the AMCA, we will not be able to reach the 42 squadrons for another 15 years. That means around 2038 is somewhere when you will be able to get your numbers back, provided everything happens very, very smoothly. So this is an area we have to worry about, but to be conscious about. The IF is fairly well off in transport and helicopter fleets. Our radar cover is fairly good. Our air defense missiles are fairly good. The local industry is supporting us with the missiles. We all know that Akash, Astra, BrahMos, long range and medium range surface-to-air missiles, they're all being built here. The second area where Indian Air Force is a little behind and needs to do something quickly, and everybody in the security establishment is conscious of, is the AWACS and the number of FRAs. You know, for a country of a continental size as India, having 3 large and 2 small AWACS is too inadequate. I personally feel in the long run, we should have close to 10 of each. Of course, both these we are trying to build within the country. We have, bought the old A320s from the Air India, and now we are trying to convert it. It's going to take 8-10 years. My suggestion has been that we should take some AWACS and FRAs on lease. There is such a proposal already being considered by the government. Another area that we need to do more, which the work is already on and being driven right at the highest level of the government, that is the drones and UAVs. The combat UAVs, the small drones, large number of Indian manufacturers are there. Drone swarms are being acquired. So this is an area which we need to get going very, very quickly. China has limits to its deployments in Tibet and Xinjiang, and therefore IF, as far as China is concerned, is not too badly positioned, and I can explain that as we go along.
So now taking the whole situation to a conflict scenario, we have been having these reports of China building airfields in Tibet, number of them, around 32, 33, I believe, number of airfields. India is strengthening its position across the border also. So how does this airfield advantage transform into actual air missions?
Yeah, firstly, I must tell you that they are having a many small, civil airports being coming up in Tibet and Xinjiang, but many of them are deep. But of serious concern to us are about 11 airfields of China. 4 of them are clustered around the Aksai Chin. That is, these are those 4, you can say, the Kashgar, Hotan, Gargunza, and Tashkar Guan. These are the 4 which are just sitting opposite us in the Ladakh area. There are another 7 of them which are in Tibet. But mind you, all their airfields are at very high altitude, barring 2 which are at around 5,000 altitude, all are above 10,000. And when it comes to height, there are serious limitations of fuel and the load that you can carry, and therefore, purely on airfields wise, they are not so very well off. Now compare that with India. India has got more than 25 airfields around the foothills from Assam right up to Kashmir, and only few airfields like Leh and Thois, which are at high altitude, that's around 10,000. The airfields in Valley, Avantipur and Srinagar at 5,000. All our airfields are below 2,000 feet in altitude. Big advantage. All our airfields are all the time being manned by military aircraft, fighter aircraft. whereas Chinese airfields are mostly manned during exercises or for some short periods in the year. So we are, I think, very well off compared to the Chinese, and airfield advantage we will have. Now there are some who say that the China will use missiles, they will knock off our frontline airfields, and they will pulverize us, and that everything will be over in 2-3 days. Such negative comments by many skeptics keeps trying to sort of demoralize the country. I must clarify that as far as the number of missions that can be launched between Indian Air Force vis-a-vis PLAF, in example, in the XI chain area, cannot launch more than 100 missions a day. Indian Air Force can launch from Ambala, from many of these airfields, we can launch as much as 300 missions a day. So we are much, much better. Even Indian Army is sitting in much larger numbers than China on our border. We got close to 300,000 army men, where Chinese have got only around 100,000 people, and they're not acclimatized. Our people are sitting through the year in these forward bases. So I think we are certainly in a good position. Indian Air Force will ensure a certain amount of air dominance. We will do interdiction missions. We will knock off the critical supply lines, their logistic supplies. We will knock off, we will give battlefield support to the ground troops. Our transport aircraft and helicopters will do, positioning across the valleys. They will do intra-theater positioning. So I think overall, air power wise, we are in a much better position because of their sparse and few airfields. Yes.
China and Pakistan, the all-weather friends. And I refer to Pakistan as the non-state actor for China. And now the US has also stepped into the picture. They're upgrading the F-16 squadrons. How well is, and obviously China is also supporting the Pakistani Air Force. How well is India prepared, sir, to take on, in case it happens, a two-front air power solution sort of a thing?
Firstly, let me start with this, what the Americans are giving to them for F-16s. Yes, Indian government has already lodged a complaint to say that this, because F-16 is not an aircraft which is supposed to be used against terror. It will finally be used against us. They used them during after the Balakot, in the combat that took place with Abhinandan. So we are concerned purely on that count. But otherwise, what the Americans are doing is that long overdue maintenance spares for F-16s, what they are getting. Of course, that will give a long lease to the F-16s. And for that, the government is tackling that diplomatically. Now, militarily, I must tell you that the service chiefs have said it, and so has the government on the floor of the parliament, that it may not be just two front. We should call it a three-front war, because there are two fronts with China, one in the east and one in the north, and there is a third front with Pakistan. So that is what the Indian armed forces are looking at. As far as Pakistan is concerned, I must tell you, they are dependent on China mainly because they know that China is an insurance against India for them. It's cheap insurance for them. But actually speaking, the whole is with America to a large extent. Why? All army generals and the politicians, their investments are all in the West. Their children are studying in the West. Their children are working in the West. Not a single of them has got a plot in Beijing or in Shanghai. Not a single guy whose son is working in China. So with the result, the West has fair amount of hold over Pakistan. So, but notwithstanding, if China and India were to have a war, Pakistan can come in to take advantage, maybe in Kashmir. But if India and Pakistan were to have war, China will give only material support, and I don't think that a fresh front will be opened. The Chinese Air Force, PLA Air Force, and Pakistan Air Force, they are regularly exercising. They have similar aircraft. They have sorted out interoperability issues. So therefore, that thing is something we have to cater to. We are already catering. We will perhaps find fight a defensive battle on one front and maintain offensive on the other. And that's the kind of strategy the Air Force will have to in case the three-front war actually happens. Yes.
Sir, after the commissioning of INS Vikrant, there's been a lot of excitement and talk about building a third aircraft carriers. Now, till now, we have been using our island chains, Andaman Nicobar or the Lakshadweep, more as a defensive options. If do you feel that if we use these island chains more as an offensive option, the building of the third aircraft carrier could be postponed a bit given the financial crunch the country has?
Yeah, firstly, I must tell you that India is blessed to be the only country in the world to have an ocean named after it. And India juts, if you see the geography, India juts into Indian Ocean like a dagger. And our island territories, especially the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, are the most strategically located island chains anywhere in the world. Yes, the Prime Minister recently commissioned India's first indigenous aircraft carrier, ISC-1, they call it, and the Indian Navy calls it INS Vikrant. It took us over 2 decades to build. It cost us a lot of money. It will actually become operational after about another 2 years because aircraft operations have to start in full terms. Now, the second thing I want to mention is that, there are 2 types of operations we do in the sea. One is sea control and one is sea denial. Now, sea control means you go out into the sea and start exercising control. That's the kind of thing that the Americans do, for which you require lots of aircraft carriers. But we have not reached that global stature, will not reach that global stature for maybe another 20 years or more. And therefore, for us and ours, the geopolitical and geostrategic approach is to have sea denial. Now, sea denial, we have to do primarily of the northern Indian Ocean, that is between Malacca Strait and the Gulf of Aden, because that is where all these sea lanes are passing through. Now, so we have, as you said, the funds are limited. We have to choose as to how do we want to invest. Do we want submarines, which are a great platform for sea denial, and use our island territories to make good for an aircraft carrier, which perhaps we cannot afford right now. As an Air Force officer, I do not want to say more on this issue because my friends in the Navy may sort of disagree, but the total funding available. Remember, for us, the immediate threat is on the land borders because both our neighbors, we have to save our territory. They are all vying our territory, and therefore, a certain amount of funding for the Army and Air Force for the northern and western border will have to be there. So if in the peninsula, we have got a large number of airfields. Indian Air Force has got Su-30s at Tanjavur, which is quite down south in the peninsula. We have got a lot of naval airfields. Air Force has also got large. Today, the Su-30, even without refueling, has got a 1,500-kilometer range, and with air refueling, the radius, not range, radius of action. It can cover from Gulf of Aden to Malacca Strait, from the mainland itself. But that is not good enough. We have got island territories. In Andaman, we have got 4 airstrips. 2 are already having larger runways. The other 2 have smaller runways. If we were to decide, which is in the mind of the government, to build up these 4 airfields, at least 2 or 3 of them are made proper military air bases with all kinds of assets, you will find that our reach, if a Su-30 squadron is permanently positioned in Andaman, they will be able to reach South China Sea. That is the kind of control we can actually exercise. Mind you, Chinese Navy is still thin in Indian Ocean. They have got only one proper base, that is Djibouti. That's a military base. As far as Godar and Hambantota in Sri Lanka are concerned, these 2 have been leased. They are primarily for logistic support. Of course, the logistic support is required by the Navy, but they are not. There are no immediate plans to make them full-fledged military air bases because the lease doesn't allow that. So therefore, we have to take our calls. The Chinese will bring in an aircraft carrier group into Indian Ocean not earlier than 2035 or so, because for them the much greater threat is in the Pacific. They have to take on Americans there. So my suggestion has been that if we dwell these two island airfields and we have adequate number of airfields in our peninsula, the Indian Air Force, it's a whole of nation approach. The Indian Air Force aircraft are meant for defense of the peninsula too. So therefore, we will be able to use the Su-30s, and with the island territories also coming up in a big way, we will be able to handle the threat in the northern Indian Ocean in a much better way. Yes.
On that note, sir, I would like to thank you because we are running short of time. So I would like to thank you for all the information you have given us, the perspective you have given us on air power. And we would like to come back to you for future discussions on such issues. Thank you and Jai Hind, sir.
Thank you, Mayank, and always a pleasure working with Kashi Manthan. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Keep up the great work.
Thank you so much, sir.
Bye.